At the family meeting they called me poor. Then my Rolls-Royce pulled into the driveway. You know that sinking feeling when your phone buzzes and you see that family member's name on the screen? That's exactly what happened to me 3 weeks ago. Aunt Patricia's name lit up my cracked iPhone screen like a neon warning sign. "Jarvis, darling," her voice dripped with fake sweetness through the speaker. "We're having our annual Whitmore family gathering at the estate this Sunday. 2 o'clock sharp. Don't be late. If you can make it, of course." That pause. That loaded, judgmental pause that said everything she didn't dare speak aloud. See, I'm the black sheep of the Whitmore family. While my cousins Blake and Cameron went to Harvard and Yale respectively, I dropped out of college to chase what they called pipe dreams. While they landed 6-figure jobs at Daddy's investment firm, I've been scraping by, working odd jobs and living in a studio apartment in downtown Denver that's smaller than their walk-in closets. For 5 years I've endured their sideways glances, their backhanded compliments, their concerned questions about my future. Every family gathering was a masterclass in passive aggression, with Aunt Patricia leading the choir of disappointment. But this year was different. This year I had a secret. 3 months ago my life changed in ways I never could have imagined. But they didn't know that. Nobody knew that. As far as the Whitmores were concerned, I was still their charity case, their cautionary tale, their reminder of what happens when you don't follow the family blueprint. "I'll be there," I told Aunt Patricia, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Oh, well, wonderful. We'll see you then." I could practically hear her thinking, if she can afford the gas money to drive that beat-up Honda here. Little did she know, I wouldn't be driving the Honda. The next few days crawled by like molasses. I found myself rehearsing conversations in the mirror, imagining their faces when they realized how wrong they'd been about me. But mostly, I tried to calm the butterflies doing aerial acrobatics in my stomach. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Colorado weather that matched my mood perfectly. I stood in my bathroom, staring at my reflection, wondering if I was making a mistake. Maybe I should just skip it. Maybe I should let them keep thinking what they thought. But then I remembered every snide comment, every pitying look, every time they made me feel like I was worth less than the designer shoes on their feet. Well, today was the day everything changed. I slipped into my best dress, a simple black number I'd bought at Target but had tailored to perfection, and checked my phone. The text message was still there, confirming everything was ready. "Vehicle will be there at 1:30 p.m. sharp. Everything is prepared as requested. James." 1:30. That gave me just enough time to arrive fashionably late and make the entrance I'd been dreaming about for years. The Whitmore estate sat on 40 acres of pristine Colorado countryside, complete with a circular driveway that could accommodate a small parade. Today it would accommodate something much more interesting. As I applied my lipstick one final time, I couldn't help but smile. They had no idea what was coming. The ride to the Whitmore estate was surreal. I sat in the back of James's Mercedes, watching familiar neighborhoods blur past the tinted windows, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Every mile brought me closer to a conversation I'd been rehearsing for months. James caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Nervous, Ms. Whitmore." "Terrified," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty. "Sometimes the best performances come from genuine emotion," he said with a knowing smile. James had been my secret weapon, my inside man in a world I was about to turn upside down. "Your timing is perfect. According to my sources, they're all gathered on the back terrace for brunch." Course they were. The back terrace overlooked the prize-winning rose garden and the man-made lake that Uncle Harrison had installed for ambience. It was where they always gathered for their little ceremonies of superiority, sipping mimosas and discussing their latest acquisitions while judging anyone who wasn't keeping up with their lifestyle. As we pulled up to the estate's ornate iron gates, I could see cars already lining the circular driveway. Blake's silver BMW M8, Cameron's white Tesla Model S, cousin Natasha's red Porsche Cayenne. Each vehicle worth more than I used to make in a year. Used to make being the operative phrase. James stopped the Mercedes just outside the gates. "This is where I leave you." Your ride should be here in approximately 8 minutes. Are you ready? I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Walking through those gates on foot felt like entering enemy territory. The sprawling Tudor-style mansion loomed ahead, all stone and glass and architectural intimidation. Perfectly manicured lawns stretched in every direction, maintained by a crew of landscapers who probably earned more than most college graduates. I could hear them before I could see them. The familiar sound of Whitmore family conversation. Aunt Patricia's theatrical laugh echoing across the terrace, Uncle Harrison's booming voice holding court, the gentle clink of crystal glasses and silver cutlery against fine china. Jarvis! Cousin Natasha spotted me first as I rounded the corner of the house. She was wearing what looked like a designer sundress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I can't believe you actually came. The conversation died as all eyes turned to me. 14 members of the Whitmore clan, seated around an elaborate brunch spread that looked like something out of Southern Living magazine. Fresh fruit arranged in crystal bowls, gourmet quiches still steaming, bottles of champagne chilling in silver buckets. Well, well. Aunt Patricia rose from her seat at the head of the table, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Look who decided to grace us with her presence. I forced a smile and took the empty chair they'd positioned as far from the main conversation as possible. The kids' table equivalent for the family disappointment. Sorry I'm late, I said, helping myself to a croissant from the basket nearest me. Traffic was murder. Traffic. Blake smirked, exchanging glances with Cameron. In that old Honda of yours, I'm surprised you made it at all. Isn't that thing held together with duct tape and prayers? The table erupted in polite laughter. Uncle Harrison leaned forward with mock concern. Jarvis, dear, we've been worried about you. It's been 6 months since we've seen you. Are you managing okay? There it was. The loaded question wrapped in false concern. Are you managing? Translation, are you still broke? Are you still failing? Are you still our family's greatest disappointment? I checked my phone discreetly. 2:07 p.m. Right on schedule. Actually, Uncle Harrison, I said, taking a slow sip of the mimosa someone had reluctantly poured for me. I've been doing better than you might think. The conversation continued to swirl around me. Discussions of quarterly earnings, vacation homes in the Hamptons, private school applications for their children. I nodded and smiled in all the right places, but inside I was counting down the minutes. Any moment now, everything would change. So Jarvis, Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. What exactly have you been doing with yourself? Last we heard you were... What was it? Trying to become a photographer. The table fell silent except for the gentle tinkling of wind chimes hanging from the terrace pergola. 14 pairs of eyes focused on me with the intensity of a courtroom during cross-examination. That was 2 years ago, Aunt Patricia, I said, keeping my voice level. I've moved on to other things. Cameron leaned back in his chair, his expression oozing condescension. Other things like what? Don't tell me you're still chasing those get-rich-quick schemes you were always talking about. Heat rose in my cheeks, but I forced myself to remain calm. They didn't know. They couldn't know. Not yet. I've been investing, I said simply. The collective smirk that rippled around the table was almost audible. Blake actually snorted into his mimosa. Investing. Uncle Harrison's eyebrows shot up toward his receding hairline. With what capital, sweetheart? The last time we talked you were working at that coffee shop in... Where was it? That questionable part of town. Riverside District, I corrected. And yes, I was working at Grounded Coffee. Great place, actually. You should try their Ethiopian blend sometime. I'm sure it's charming. Aunt Patricia's smile could have frozen hell over. But really, dear, investing requires actual money. Significant money. The kind of money that comes from steady employment and sound financial planning. Cousin Natasha jumped in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Jarvis, honey, we're not judging you. We're just concerned. These investment scams target people in your situation. All the time. Remember when you thought you could make money with that online thing? Cryptocurrency, I said. And it wasn't a scam. Of course not, Blake rolled his eyes. That's why you're still living in that studio apartment, right? Because all your investments worked out so well. The laughter that followed felt like nails on a chalkboard. I checked my phone again. 2:12 p.m. Where were they? Uncle Harrison cleared his throat, assuming his patriarch voice. Jarvis, we love you. Your family. But this pattern of yours is concerning. First it was photography, then some kind of online business, now investing. When are you going to settle down and get a real job? Something stable. Like what? I asked, genuinely curious to hear their suggestions. Well, Aunt Patricia exchanged meaningful glances with the others. Harrison and I have been talking. There's an opening at the country club. Hostess position. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. Steady paycheck, decent benefits. We could put in a word for you. A hostess at their country club. Seating their friends, taking their orders, cleaning up after their parties. The irony was so thick I could taste it. That's very generous, I said, but I'll have to decline. The temperature on the terrace seemed to drop 10 degrees. Decline. Cameron's voice pitched higher. Jarvis, do you understand what they're offering you? This is a real opportunity. A chance to finally get your life on track. My life is on track, I said quietly. Is it? Natasha's perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up. Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you're still the same lost little girl who dropped out of college to chase fantasies. That stung. Not because it wasn't true. 5 years ago, that's exactly what I was. But because of how much had changed, how much they couldn't see, how much they refused to see. I was about to respond when I heard it. The low, unmistakable rumble that made my heart skip a beat. Right on time. You know what? I stood up from the table, smoothing my dress. I think I hear my ride. Your ride? Blake looked confused. I thought you drove yourself. The rumble grew louder, accompanied by the distinctive sound of tires on gravel. Every head at the table turned toward the front of the house, confusion replacing smugness on their faces. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone to check a text message I already knew was there. I had someone drop me off earlier. This is my ride home. The sound grew closer, and I could see the exact moment recognition dawned in Uncle Harrison's eyes. That wasn't the sound of my beat-up Honda. The rumble grew louder, deeper, more commanding. It wasn't just a car engine. It was a statement rolling up their pristine driveway. I watched as confusion spread across 14 faces like ripples in a pond. What on earth? Aunt Patricia stood up, craning her neck toward the front of the house. Sounds expensive, Cameron muttered, his cocky smirk faltering for the first time all afternoon. Through the terrace railings we caught our first glimpse. A flash of midnight blue paint, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. A vehicle so pristine it looked like it had rolled straight off a showroom floor. Is that a... Blake's voice trailed off. Rolls-Royce Cullinan, I said casually, checking my nails. Black badge edition, if I'm not mistaken. The table went dead silent. Even the wind chimes seemed to stop their gentle music. Uncle Harrison's face had gone pale. Jarvis, whose car is that? Before I could answer, a man in an impeccable black suit stepped out of the driver's side. Tall, distinguished, with the kind of bearing that screamed professional chauffeur. He adjusted his cap and began walking toward the back terrace with measured, confident steps. Ms. Whitmore. His voice carried easily across the lawn. Your vehicle is ready whenever you are, ma'am. 14 heads swiveled toward me like I'd suddenly sprouted wings. Thank you, Jeffrey, I called back. I'll be right there. Jeffrey. I'd never met Jeffrey in my life, but James had coached me well on the details. The Rolls-Royce was a rental. The most expensive rental I'd ever seen. But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. I'm sorry. Aunt Patricia's voice came out as barely a whisper. Did he just call you Ms. Whitmore? He did. And he's your driver. One of them, I said, standing and smoothing my dress. The lie came easier than I'd expected. Jeffrey usually handles the weekend runs. Cameron's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. One of them. Jarvis, what the hell is going on here? I looked around the table at their stunned faces. These people who had spent years making me feel small, worthless, like a stain on their precious family name. For once in my life, I had their complete and undivided attention. What's going on, I said slowly, savoring each word, is that you all made some very wrong assumptions about my life. But you live in that tiny apartment, Natasha stammered. You work at a coffee shop. Worked, I corrected. Past tense. And yes, I do live in a small apartment. It's called being practical. Why would I need a mansion when I travel 3 weeks out of every month? Blake leaned forward, his face flushed. Travel where? For what? Business meetings. Investment consultations. Property acquisitions. Each word was a small victory. A tiny crack in the wall of their certainty. Turns out when you're good at something, people pay you very well to do it. Uncle Harrison found his voice first. Jarvis, if this is some kind of joke. Do I look like I'm joking, Uncle Harrison? I gestured toward the Rolls-Royce, where Jeffrey stood patiently beside the open rear door. Does Jeffrey look like he's part of some elaborate prank? The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of the engine's gentle idle. I don't understand. Aunt Patricia sank back into her chair. 5 years ago you had nothing. You were working retail, living paycheck to paycheck. 5 years ago I was learning, I said. I was watching, listening, figuring out how the world really works. While you all were comfortable in your inherited wealth, I was building something from scratch. Building what? Cameron's voice cracked like a teenager's. I smiled, the same sharp smile Aunt Patricia had perfected over the years. An empire. The word hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Jeffrey cleared his throat politely. Ms. Whitmore, you have a conference call with the Tokyo office in 30 minutes. Tokyo office. I didn't have a Tokyo office. But Jeffrey's timing was perfect, and his delivery was flawless. Of course, I said, checking my watch. We should probably get going. I turned back to the table, where 14 family members sat frozen in various states of shock and disbelief. Thank you for brunch, I said politely. The quiche was lovely. Patricia, we should do this again sometime. Maybe at my place next time. The walk from the terrace to the Rolls-Royce felt like a victory lap. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of voices as the family erupted into frantic whispers, but I didn't look back. Jeffrey held the door open with the professional grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. After you, Ms. Whitmore. I slid into the back seat, sinking into leather so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. The interior was a cathedral of luxury. Ambient lighting, polished wood trim, a ceiling that looked like a starry night sky. Through the partition, I could see Jeffrey settling into the driver's seat. But we didn't leave immediately. Through the tinted windows, I watched my family stumble toward the front of the house like survivors of a natural disaster. They clustered around the car, pointing and gesturing, their faces a mixture of awe and confusion. Aunt Patricia was the first to approach. She knocked tentatively on the window, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the glass. I lowered the window just enough to hear her voice. Jarvis, she said, her usual commanding tone replaced by something I'd never heard from her before. Uncertainty. Could we talk for a moment? Of course, I said graciously. What would you like to discuss? All of this. She gestured helplessly at the car, at Jeffrey, at the entire situation. I don't understand. How did this happen? Before I could answer, the others crowded around. Blake pressed his face almost against the glass, trying to peer into the interior. Cameron was taking pictures with his phone. Natasha kept muttering, "This can't be real, this can't be real." Uncle Harrison pushed his way to the front of the group. Jarvis, I think we deserve an explanation. 6 months ago, you couldn't afford to fix your car's air conditioning. Now you're riding around in a $250,000 vehicle with a personal driver. Actually, I said, this particular model runs closer to 400,000. The Black Badge Edition has some unique features. The collective intake of breath was audible. 400. Cameron's voice was barely a whisper. But let me ask you something, Uncle Harrison, I continued. Do I really owe you an explanation? Have any of you ever asked about my life because you genuinely cared, or only when you wanted to remind me how much better you were doing? The silence that followed was deafening. That's what I thought, I said softly. For 5 years, you've treated me like your family's charity case. Every gathering, every phone call, every interaction was designed to remind me of my place in the Whitmore hierarchy. Well, congratulations. You succeeded in motivating me. Aunt Patricia's face had gone white. Jarvis, we never meant to. Yes, you did. My voice was calm, matter of fact. You absolutely meant to. Every single time. Blake found his voice. But how? How did you go from working at a coffee shop to this? I looked around at their faces. These people who had never believed in me, who had written me off, who had made me feel like I was less than nothing. You really want to know? They nodded eagerly, desperately. Cryptocurrency, I said simply. The word landed like a bomb. But you said. Natasha started. I said it wasn't a scam. It wasn't. While you were all laughing at me for investing my coffee shop tips in Bitcoin when it was $800 a coin, I was building a portfolio. When Ethereum was $30, when everyone said it was worthless, I was buying more. Cameron's face had gone green. But the crash in 2018. I didn't panic sell like most people. Bought more. When the market crashed in 2020, I bought more. When everyone was scared, I saw opportunity. How much? Uncle Harrison's voice was hoarse. How much what? How much are you worth? I smiled, remembering every time they'd made me feel worthless, every pitying look, every concerned comment about my future. More than all of you combined. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Jeffrey's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Whitmore, shall I start the engine? Your call is in 25 minutes. Yes, Jeffrey. Thank you. As the Rolls-Royce began to purr with renewed power, I looked out at my family one last time. The hostess position at the country club, I said to Aunt Patricia. Thank you for thinking of me. But I'll have to pass. I'm actually in the process of buying my own club. 3 weeks later, I was back in my studio apartment, staring at my bank statement on my laptop screen. The numbers were real, but they still felt like a dream. My phone buzzed. Aunt Patricia's name appeared on the screen for the 5th time that day. I let it go to voicemail. Since the family meeting, my phone had been ringing non-stop. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. Blake had sent 14 text messages asking for investment advice. Cameron had called wanting to discuss business opportunities. Natasha had actually shown up at my apartment building twice, trying to get past the security I'd had installed. But the truth was more complicated than the story I'd let them believe. I wasn't worth more than all of them combined. Not yet, anyway. But I wasn't the broke failure they'd assumed I was, either. The reality was somewhere in between. Messier, more human but ultimately more satisfying. The cryptocurrency part was true. I had invested my coffee shop tips in Bitcoin back in 2017, and I had bought more during every crash. But I wasn't sitting on hundreds of millions. I was sitting on something much more valuable. Financial independence, genuine opportunities, and the knowledge that I'd built something real. The Rolls-Royce. Rental. An expensive one that had cost me $3,000 for the afternoon, but worth every penny for the look on their faces. Jeffrey. An actor friend of James who owed me a favor from my photography days. The Tokyo office. Pure fiction, but delivered with Oscar-worthy conviction. What wasn't fiction was the business I'd built over the past 3 years. Starting with crypto gains, I diversified into real estate, invested in startups, and developed a consulting firm that helped other people navigate the digital investment landscape. I employed 12 people, owned property in 4 states, and yes, I was in the process of purchasing a small boutique hotel in Aspen. Not exactly a country club, but close enough. My phone buzzed again. This time it was James. "How are you feeling about your performance last weekend?" he asked without preamble. "Like I should win an Emmy," I admitted. "But also like I might have gone a little overboard." "Did you though?" His tone was thoughtful. "Jarvis, they spent 5 years making you feel worthless. One afternoon of letting them think you're wildly successful seems like pretty mild revenge." He had a point, but something was nagging at me. "The problem is," I said, walking to my window and looking out at the Denver skyline, "now they want something from me. They think I'm this crypto billionaire, and they're all circling like sharks. So tell them the truth." "Which is what, exactly?" "That you're successful but not in the way they think. That you built something real through hard work and smart decisions. That you don't need their approval anymore, but you also don't need to lie to prove your worth." I was quiet for a moment, processing his words. "They're having another family gathering next month," I said finally. "Uncle Harrison's birthday. Are you going?" Thought about it. I could skip it, let the myth I'd created continue to grow. Or I could go and have a real conversation about who I'd become. Not the fantasy billionaire version, but the actual version. The woman who'd taken risks, learned from failures, and built a life she was proud of. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself. "I think I am. In the Honda." I laughed. "Actually, I've been thinking about buying a Tesla. Nothing too flashy. Just something reliable and practical." "That sounds very you." He was right. Somewhere between the coffee shop and the Rolls-Royce, I'd lost sight of who I actually was. The performance had been satisfying, but it wasn't sustainable. And more importantly, it wasn't honest. My phone buzzed with another text from Blake. "'Cause we should talk about your crypto strategy. I've got some capital I'd like to invest with you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "Let's schedule a real conversation. I have some things to explain." Uncle Harrison's 70th birthday party was exactly what I'd expected. Elegant, expensive, and filled with the same cast of characters who'd spent years treating me like the family disappointment. But this time was different. This time I knew who I was. I pulled into the circular driveway in my new Tesla Model Y. Nice enough to show I was doing well, practical enough to represent who I actually was. No Jeffrey this time. No rented luxury that wasn't really mine. The whispers started before I even got out of the car. "That's not the Rolls-Royce," I heard Cameron say to his wife. "Maybe she has multiple cars," Natasha replied hopefully. I walked toward the back terrace where the party was in full swing, wearing a dress I'd bought with my own money, carrying confidence I'd earned through my own efforts. "Jarvis!" Aunt Patricia spotted me first, her voice carrying that same forced enthusiasm it had held for the past month. "I'm so glad you could make it. We have so much to discuss." The crowd parted as I made my way to the birthday boy. Uncle Harrison stood beside a table laden with gifts, wearing a smile that looked more nervous than celebratory. "Happy birthday, Uncle Harrison," I said, handing him a small wrapped box. He opened it to reveal a vintage pocket watch I'd found at an estate sale. Meaningful, personal, and completely unrelated to my supposed crypto fortune. "It's beautiful," he said, and for the first time in years, his surprise seemed genuine. The family gathered around us in that familiar semicircle of expectation. They wanted answers, explanations, investment opportunities. They wanted to know how to get rich quick, how to catch lightning in a bottle, how to transform their comfortable wealth into the kind of fortune they thought I possessed. "So," Blake jumped right in, "I've been researching cryptocurrency markets, and I think I'm ready to make some serious investments. What do you think about Bitcoin's current position?" "And Ethereum," Cameron added eagerly. "You mentioned Ethereum last time." I looked around at their expectant faces, these people who had spent years dismissing my dreams and ambitions, now hanging on my every word about financial markets they'd once ridiculed. "Before we talk about investments," I said, "I need to tell you all something important." The terrace went quiet. "I'm not a billionaire." The words hung in the air like smoke. I could see the confusion, the disappointment, the beginning of anger on several faces. The Rolls-Royce was rented, I continued. Jeffrey was an actor. The Tokyo office doesn't exist. Aunt Patricia's face went through approximately 7 different emotions in 3 seconds. But you said. I let you assume things that weren't entirely true, I admitted. And I'm sorry for that. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't honest. So you're still. Blake's voice trailed off. Still what? Poor. Unsuccessful. The family failure. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, then handed it to Uncle Harrison. Take a look. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the numbers. Not billionaire numbers, but impressive ones. More than comfortable, less than fantasy. This is from cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, real estate investments, business consulting, and a lot of very careful financial planning, I said. I'm not rich enough to buy a Rolls-Royce, but I'm rich enough to rent one for an afternoon to make a point. Cameron looked confused. What point? That for 5 years, you all treated me like I was worthless because I didn't follow your prescribed path to success. You measured my value by your standards, and when I didn't meet them, you wrote me off. The silence was deafening. I built something real, I continued. It's not as flashy as what you imagined, but it's mine. Earned it. And I did it while you were all convinced I was failing. Uncle Harrison handed my phone back. Jarvis, we owe you an apology. You owe me respect, I corrected. You owe me the same consideration you'd give to anyone else in this family. My success doesn't look like yours, but that doesn't make it less valid. Aunt Patricia was the first to step forward. You're right, she said quietly. We were terrible to you. All of us. The country club job, I said, looking directly at her. Did you offer that because you thought I needed help, or because you thought I needed to be put in my place? Her silence was answer enough. I'm buying the boutique hotel in Aspen, I said to the group. It's a small property, but it's going to be beautiful. You're all welcome to visit any time. As my guests, not my judges. Blake stepped forward. Jarvis, we really screwed this up, didn't we? Yeah, I said. You did. But families do that sometimes. The question is what happens next. I looked around at their faces, no longer dismissive or condescending, but genuinely curious about who I'd become and how I'd done it. Anyone want to hear the real story of how I got here? Yes. It's not as glamorous as a Rolls-Royce, but it's a lot more interesting. And for the first time in 5 years, the entire Whitmore family actually listened.